Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a WE knife. This is a pretty interesting WE knife. This is the model 711 or the Blitz. It is named, and a bunch of WE knives these days are being named. It's kind of a change they've made rather than sticking with a bunch of numbers all the time, which is a welcome change. And this has a number of other welcome changes and possibly some changes that will, or at least I believe that WE is hoping will have a broader appeal than some of their titanium frame lock knives. And I want you to think about this for a second, guys. You know, how many people out there do you suppose are willing to spend between $200 and $300 on a folding knife? Okay, you know, think about if you went and asked all your friends who aren't that into knives and don't know that much about them. All right, probably not that many. Even if it was a really good knife, you're not going to find that many people that are jumping to go and buy it. All right, now, as you move that price point lower, I think we can pretty much understand that you're going to reach more people that are willing to spend that number, whatever it is, right? If you go from 300 to 250, from 250 to 200, from down to 150 to 100, down to, you know, between 50 and 100, that the number of people willing to spend that much is ever increasing. And a lot of money can be made by selling, you know, $20,000 $50 knives instead of selling $200 $500 knives, okay? And so a lot of companies want that part of the marketplace, including a lot of high-end companies. You think of Brous Blades or Custom Knife Factory, who are trying to come out with some more budget models. Kaiser is coming out with the Tangram to be even more budget-friendly than they already are with the Vanguard series. The Grimsmo brothers, in a video, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, John Grimsmo talked about trying to offer something around the $100 price point because he felt like there were more people who would want to spend that much money. And of course, he's right. So what do you do if you want to connect with that part of the market? Well, you change what materials you're using, you change some things about your knives and try to get something out there that people are willing, that the people who are only willing to spend $100, okay, will buy. And so I think this represents at least somewhat that effort on the part of WE Knives. And so, I want to ask this question: what do you think about this price point? Okay, and watch the whole video and then kind of think it through as we work through the various features and, you know, methods of how they've engineered different things and the blade steel and the materials and all that. All right, and kind of think about what price am I willing to pay for this knife. All right, so let's go ahead now with all of that in the background and get started with a more specific discussion of this knife. I guess we should also add, by way of introduction, that this kind of fits with a number of other WE knives. They've got a bunch beginning kind of late last year. They have a bunch of knives that are G10 liner locks, the 617, the 703, the Thrax, which is the 709, the 701, which is horribly ugly, the 706. Okay, most of these are 3D Machine G10 scales and D2 blade steel. That seems to be pretty well heat treated D2 blade steel. Here is a bit of a departure from all of that because we have G10 slabs for the scales and we have VG10 steel. We also have, and I believe there's some with nested liners already. Notice these liners though are not milled out to save weight in any way, which is kind of surprising to me. That seems like kind of a WE Knives thing, and so to not have it on this knife is a little bit surprising, but that's what we're dealing with in the 711 or the Blitz. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll give you a size and weight and we'll kind of work through the features here, and I want you to kind of keep that effort that WE seems to be undertaking here and the price point in the back of your mind. All right, so we have a knife here that is just under, and I mean just under 8 inches. It is basically 7 15/16 long. The blade length is 3 3/8 inches. All right, 3 3/8 inches, and you've actually got a little more cutting edge than that at about 3 7/16. 4 9/16 on the handle length, so just over 4.5 inches. It's about 1/2 inch thick, just a little under that, in fact, and that's of course ignoring the clip. And the weight is a fairly comfortable 4.09 ounces. In terms of carry on this guy, it carries very comfortably. It's not too heavy, does not take up too much space in your pocket. overall, this is a very, very comfortable knife to have on you all the time. And of course, that's an important factor. Now, it's not the lightest, smallest thing out there in its sort of size range, but it does a pretty decent job, especially considering the non-milled out liners, okay? So that's size and weight, and for carry, it does carry pretty comfortably, with one exception that we'll get to in a little while. Blade on this guy is VG10 steel with DLC on this hollow ground bevel. It's nice and thin behind the edge, 15 thousandths behind the edge, which is really, really thin, and this slices extremely well. When you combine that small measurement with a hollow ground blade, you've got a great slicer. The blade stock itself is not super thick, it's 125 thousandths, so really, really nice performing knife for any kind of task where you're cutting through material. If you're doing food prep, cutting cardboard, anything like that where you're kind of fighting to push the knife through some material, it's going to perform really, really nicely. In terms of the grind, there's just a little tiny smile down here, and that, you know, this doesn't bother me too much. When it gets really bad and it starts to really stand out, I do have a bit of a problem with that, but I'm not going to complain about this. The VG10 steel is acceptable steel. It's not amazing. I'm not going to run around singing the praises of VG10, but it's certainly no slouch either. Nice and corrosion resistant and pretty good in terms of edge retention. Now, this knife, I did check out a bunch of different models to see what kind of variation were out there, and they all seem to have the DLC on the primary bevel there, which is not my favorite thing. I would like to at least have the option to have this black and this satin, or the whole thing satin. Okay, I like that feature, because this, you know, no matter how careful you are with it, if you carry it and use it, it's going to show some wear, which is not my favorite thing. But overall, guys, this blade is a win, okay? I have no big complaints about the blade at all. VG10 is absolutely acceptable steel. Do I love the change away from D2? Not really. I find D2 performs a little bit better than VG10, but you know, it's not different enough that I'm going to make a big deal out of it, and I don't think you should either. Now, maybe you have a strong preference for one or the other, and if that's your preference, then of course, more power to you. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is probably my favorite thing about this knife, and that is the lockup and deployment. The action on this knife is wonderful. It is really, really smooth. Even with that light blade, it will shake closed. The detent is absolutely dialed in. It's firm, and it breaks really, really cleanly, and just the action, the ball bearing pivot is super, super smooth. So I've got to give a lot of credit to WE Knives here. You know, I know they were wanting to hit a lower price point here, but they certainly didn't cut any corners on the action. The action on this guy is superb. I can, without hesitation, I will say this is the nicest action I've seen on any WE knife whatsoever. The lock is easy to actuate, it's easy to get a hold of, very, very comfortable. So if you're one of those guys that likes to flip your knife while watching TV or something like that obsessively, you're going to be pretty pleased with this. The only complaint I have is the flipper tab could be a little more comfortable. Now, if you light switch it, that is, you get your finger up here on sort of the flat portion. Let's see if I can show you this. Come on, focus. There. All right, there you go. So you can see the jimping there, kind of sending me a little message that this is where my finger is supposed to go to light switch the knife. It works well and it's pretty comfortable. However, I'm instinctively wanting to kind of catch the corner here. And over time, with the stiffness of that detent, that corner does get a little uncomfortable. So it's just a teeny bit sharp. It's not so sharp that, you know, I've had knives before where you flip it open twice and you're wishing you hadn't already. Not so with this guy. It's not that bad. It's just a little stiffer, or I mean, a little sharper than I'd like. So if they had just slightly rounded this corner, excuse me, slightly rounded this corner, I would be just a little bit happier. But the rest of the action is so dialed in, and it flips so nicely and so firmly, and it's so smooth that I can overlook that one minor thing. Okay, so very, very, very good action on this knife. Again, as I say, the best WE knife I felt. And a lot of WE knives are better than they used to be. You may recall that I used to complain, I mentioned this a few times, I used to complain about soft detents from WE knives. That seems to be a thing of the past, and this is actually very, very nice. Even better than the others that I would still say have been improved. All right, let's talk about the handle construction. That is, again, one of the things that they've done differently. What we're used to seeing from these budget-friendly WE knives is 3D machined G10, I'm sorry, and this they've gone with slabs, and then they've gone ahead and textured the slabs with the WE knife logo. Now, if you've watched Nick Shabaz's video about this knife, and it's actually this very knife, you know, he talks about this being extremely grippy, and it is, okay? If you're a cold steel fan, you know, you will love this. This is really a knife that when you grab it, it grabs you back. Is it a little overdone? Yeah, I would say this is about the most aggressive texturing that I've seen on a G10 knife. Now, given that it is G10, I'm sure that over time that is going to soften up a little bit, but it's going to have to soften up a whole lot for that to be much different than it is, okay? Bit of jimping here on the spine that's actually sharp enough to work really well. And whenever I see only like 3 or 4 jimps, I'm always a little worried, but WE's done a great job with that. Okay, so what do I think of this jimping? I mean, what do I think of this texturing? In hand, it's fine. Okay, it's not so sharp that it's, you know, painful for your skin or anything like that. There is one glaring problem with a knife that's this heavily textured, and I would say this is more heavily textured than a cold steel, and the problem is right here. Okay, if I'm gonna get my, you know, this into my pocket, I'm gonna have to slide that under this clip. Well, the clip is, under the clip is just as heavily textured as everything else, meaning I'm really gonna have to fight to get this knife in and out of pocket. And that's the one thing that I didn't mention when we were talking about how easily this pockets. And it does carry nicely, and there's enough space under the clip. I'm not complaining about any of that, but the jimping is so rough that it really, really catches your pants and wants to hold on. And so it's a real challenge to get the knife to drop all the way into your pocket. That's the biggest challenge with that heavy texturing. Now, while I've said all of that, would I have liked it if they'd put something smooth here under the clip to smooth it out? Honestly, I think that would have taken away from the look of the knife. And I will say, this is a very attractive knife from WE. Probably, again, I've said this about the 615 and a couple of others. This is a more standard looking knife. Some WE knives are way out there and they look really strange. This one, yeah, it looks like a pretty normal pocket knife. And in fact, the styling is quite nice. The way the WE logo is done with the 3 lines in alternating directions, that makes it look classy. Okay, so a lot of times if you cover the knife with your logo, it looks terrible, right? Think of all the SOG knives out there that have SOG, 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 SOG written all over them, and it looks pathetic. This, not so. It actually looks pretty nice. If it was just softened up a little, I think that would be a bit of a benefit to us. The other things that I want to touch on, let's quickly talk about the rest of the aspects of the construction. It is nested stainless steel liners, and I always like that. It feels like a little extra effort was put in to sort of add a touch of fit and finish and a touch of extra quality to the knife. Single position clip. It may look like it has 2 positions, so you can see the screw here and then a screw over here. And you go, oh, let's take this one out. But this is actually nested, so it's milled out to allow for this to fit, and that's why the one screw keeps the clip here, because there's actually a hole in the G10 that this kind of locks into, and then the screw just holds it in. Okay, so you're not going to be moving that clip at all. Over to this side, it won't work. Nice back spacer, and they've integrated the lanyard hole very well back here. So that's all good. So in terms of construction, I'm actually quite impressed. The quality is good. The process, the choices that they've made in terms of how they're going to put it together, I'm very much pleased with. Of course, the Torx screws are going to be a big deal for some people. You know, the star screws that WE often uses, I don't hate them. You know, I mean, I've taken a few apart, and they don't, The hardware they give you seems to work just fine. Yeah, I know it's nice to have a common feature all the way around, or I mean a common screw head all the way around so that all your knives are kind of put together the same way, but that's not really the way the industry works anyway. So there you go, that's my discussion of the handle. Very ergonomic, very comfortable, a little small for my hand, but not the end of the world. And I know someone mentioned that I say the end of the world all the time, and so in other words, it's not a big deal, okay? It's a little bit small, but I'm not really going to complain about it. Let's go ahead and get to some comparisons, and I have a lot of those, and this is where this becomes kind of difficult, okay? So we've got this G10 liner lock with VG10 steel. There are a lot of knives that would fit into, you know, sort of a similar price point, a similar roll. Here's, of course, the steel wheel cut jack, D2 steel, FRN handle. This knife is like 40 bucks. You know, that kind of creates a challenge. Here we have the Rat Model 1, again in D2 steel, and this time in carbon fiber laminate. Now this is the cheap carbon fiber, so I'll grant you that. But again, you know, this knife is maybe $50. All right, and similar construction, similar materials, creates, again, it makes me ask the question, is $100 warranted for this knife? Another knife here that kind of really messes with the program is this Rake knife. This is the 138B from Rake, 14C28N blade steel. Again, nested stainless steel liners in 3D Machine G10. And again, this guy is about 50 bucks, maybe a little less than 50 bucks, depending on what part of the world you're in. Okay, so is this knife that much better than this, that it warrants that extra cost? I know there's some titanium here, which does make a bit of a difference. And let me say this, let me finish a few more comparisons first. So here's a pair of two S35VN on this one. Normally it's going to be S30V. Again, G10 stainless steel liner. And around, you know, a standard one in S30V is going to be around $120. All right. Similar size, American Lawman, CTS XHP steel, very good steel, a little less blade. The action, of course, is very different because of the triad lock. This guy, again, is going to be around $100, I think a little less than that. And let's grab a Kershaw as well. So here's the Kershaw Knockout, 14C28N blade steel. Normally this is the Damascus blade, but we'll pretend this is a standard one. And again, you're looking at about 70 bucks for this, for a very nice knife that's going to have very similar in terms of its features and its roll. Okay, so back to this knife. After considering all of those comparisons about what's out there, you know, let me say a couple of things where this one really shines. The action is superb. It's absolutely better than any of the other knives that I've shown you for similar price point or cheaper. Okay, it really is. In order to get an action that would be close to this, I'd be pulling out either another WE knife in titanium, or I'd have to get a ZT or something like that. Okay, because it has great action. It really does. There is some titanium here. Okay. Backspacer and clip, which is nice, but does it warrant the extra, you know, let's say $20? You know, if this was an $80 knife, I think I could probably be a little more positive in my recommendation. Since it's at $100, I'm going to say this. This knife is well built. It's absolutely well suited for what it's intended to do, and it will do a great job of it. It's a nice performing knife. It's going to carry easily. And so really the only issue is that texturing is a little heavy, and a lot of people aren't going to care about that because they'll trade that extra grip for the potential to tear up their pockets. You know, there are a lot of cold steel fans out there who really love that super grippy handle. And in some ways, I'm one of those people, okay? So overall, absolutely great knife. And if we were just talking about the quality of the knife overall, I would say, yep, well done. But if you ask, is it a great value? Is it a great knife for the price? Then I have to hesitate a little bit. So that's my take on the WE Blitz or 6 or 711, I'm sorry. And it is a really, really cool knife, and I definitely have enjoyed having to be able to check it out. Thanks a lot, Zell, for sending this knife along and a bunch of others. And if you're not subscribed to Zell and if you don't watch his videos, go check him out. He's often doing some great stuff over there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.